My name is Audrey. I'm 25 years old, and my own father called me a leech and kicked me out of my home in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Before I tell you how that led to him ending up in the back of a police car, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. It was laden with a perfect bite of sweet potato casserole, the kind with the toasted marshmallows on top, my favorite. Outside, the November air in Dayton, Ohio was crisp and cold, but inside, the house was warm, filled with the smells of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie. It should have been perfect. Then, my father's voice sliced through the comfortable quiet. "You're nothing but a leech, Audrey." He didn't shout. It was worse than that. He said it calmly, with a cold finality that froze the blood in my veins. He set his own fork down with a deliberate clink against his plate. "It's time for you to leave this house." The sweet potato casserole suddenly looked alien on my fork, tasteless. The silence that fell over the dining room was so complete, so heavy, that I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking from the living room. The same clock I'd paid $200 to have repaired last month. I lifted my eyes, searching for an ally, for any sign of protest. My mother, Diane, refused to meet my gaze. She just stared intently at her plate, pushing a single green bean around with her fork, as if it was the most fascinating thing in the world. Across from me, my 17-year-old sister, Nora, looked like a deer in headlights, her eyes wide and fixed on her half-empty glass of water. No one was coming to save me. What made the betrayal feel like a physical blow was the timing. Just 20 minutes earlier, I'd been bubbling with excitement, telling them all about the promotion I'd just received at work. A new title, more responsibility, and a significant bump to my salary. I had been so proud, thinking about how much easier it would make things for us. I'd spent the entire morning in this kitchen, basting the turkey, mashing potatoes, and baking 3 different pies from scratch while they all watched football. The steam was still rising from the food I had made, from the groceries I had bought. And now, my father was declaring me unwelcome. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My name was on the electric bill that kept these lights glowing. My name was on the water bill that had filled their glasses. My name was on the receipt for every single morsel of food on this table, and my name was on the insurance statement that had covered my mother's doctor appointment just last week. Yet somehow, I was the burden. It hadn't always been this way. Just 3 months ago, when Mom lost her job at the accounting firm, I stepped in without a second thought. That's what families do, right? The bills started piling up faster than Mom's excuses for not finding new work, and Dad's part-time job at the hardware store barely covered the mortgage. So I took over. Utilities, groceries, car insurance, even Mom's medical copays. Each month, as more accounts were transferred into my name, Dad grew more distant. More resentful. I remember hearing him 2 weeks ago, talking to our neighbor over the back fence. His voice carried through the open kitchen window while I was washing dishes. "It's just not right," he'd complained, his voice low and bitter. "A man losing control of his own household. She walks around here now like she owns the place." I didn't realize he was talking about me until I heard him say my name. Now, back at the table, Walter stared at me, his jaw clenched, waiting. He was waiting for the tears, for the pleading. He wanted me to break. When I simply lowered my fork and continued to chew the tasteless food in my mouth, his knuckles whitened around his own fork. I swallowed, then calmly took another bite. "Did you hear what I said?" His voice rose, thick with irritation. "You need to be out. Out by the end of the weekend." My hands began to tremble, but not from fear. It was something else. A hot flash crawled up my neck. It was rage, cold and pure. For months, I had been running on a treadmill, pouring my savings, my energy, my future into keeping this family afloat, and this was my reward. To be thrown out like garbage. I set my fork down. I carefully placed my napkin beside my plate. And for the first time, I met his gaze head-on. "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was calm, almost thoughtful. He blinked, clearly thrown by my composure. The silence stretched again, taut and uncomfortable. Then, my mother finally spoke. But she didn't defend me. She didn't ask Walter what was wrong with him. Her voice was a hushed, hurried whisper. "Audrey," she said, finally looking up from her plate, a flicker of panic in her eyes. "You'll still cover the insurance for this month, right? I have my appointment on Tuesday." And there it was. It felt like a punch to the gut. The full, ugly picture snapped into perfect, painful focus. I wasn't their daughter. I was a resource. I wasn't family, I was a walking, talking ATM. That was the moment the switch flipped. The part of me that had been desperate for their approval, the part that would have done anything to keep the peace, just died. It withered on the vine, right there at the Thanksgiving table. I stood up, my chair scraping softly against the hardwood floor. I picked up my plate. "Of course, Mom," I said, my voice steady despite the hollow canyon that had just opened up in my chest. "I'll take care of it before I go." As I walked to the kitchen, my mind was no longer a swirl of hurt. It was a machine, cataloging, assessing. The internet I'd upgraded for Nora's schoolwork. The new refrigerator I'd bought in July when the old one died. Every utility account, every financial tie. In that moment, as I looked at the three of them, my father, puffed up with his petty victory, my mother, worried only about her next appointment, and my sister, frozen in silence, something inside me didn't just break. It turned to steel. I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't storm into my room. I didn't slam the door. The rage inside me was too cold for that, too sharp. I moved with a strange, deliberate calm, closing my bedroom door with a soft click. The sound echoed the closing of a door in my life, a life where I believed, on some level, that I was loved for who I was and not for what I could provide. For a few moments, I just stood in the dark, breathing in and out. My mind, which had been a hurricane of hurt and confusion, was now eerily quiet. It was a blank slate, ready for a new plan. I flicked on the lamp and started packing. Not with the frantic energy of someone who's been kicked out, but with the methodical precision of someone evacuating a disaster zone. Sweaters folded neatly, jeans rolled tight. I was on autopilot, my hands moving while my mind worked on a different plane. I reached into my desk drawer to grab the financial documents I kept there, insurance statements, utility bills, receipts. I was going to need proof of everything. My hand brushed against a stiff manila folder tucked deep behind a stack of old yearbooks. It felt out of place. I hadn't put it there. Curiosity, cold and sharp, cut through my methodical movements. I pulled it out. My father's name, Walter, was scrawled on the tab. I hesitated for only a second before opening it. Inside were bank statements. Paper statements, which was strange. We'd switched everything to electronic months ago to save money, or so I thought. These were for an account I'd never seen before, from a credit union across town. I pulled out the first one, dated 3 months ago. July. My eyes scanned the page until they landed on the numbers, and the air left my lungs in a single, silent gasp. A deposit for $4,000. I pulled out the next one. August. A deposit for $5,000. The last one was from 2 weeks ago. The balance was now nearly $7,000. While I had been draining my savings, eating ramen noodles 3 times a week to stretch my budget, my father had been squirreling away thousands of dollars. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. It felt like I was looking at evidence from a crime scene. In a way, I was. But there was more. Tucked in the back of the folder was a glossy brochure from a boat dealer. A 19-foot bass boat, sleek and powerful. In the margins, in my father's familiar handwriting, were notes. Down payment, $5,500, circled in blue ink. And below that, a phrase underlined twice, so hard the pen had nearly torn the page, scheduled delivery after Thanksgiving. A fishing boat. While I was paying for his wife's medical bills and the internet his other daughter needed for her college applications, he was planning to buy a fishing boat. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just impulsive cruelty at the dinner table. This was a plan. A cold, calculated, premeditated plan. I dug deeper into the folder and found the final piece of the puzzle. A small notepad. On it, a list of dates. November utilities due, 15th, 22nd, 28th. My name was written next to each one, followed by a question mark. And at the bottom of the page, another underlined phrase, after bills paid. They had been waiting. They had been waiting for my paycheck to clear, for me to cover all the expenses for the month one last time before they showed me the door. They weren't just kicking me out. They were using me up to the very last drop and then discarding the empty shell. A soft knock on my door made me jump. The door creaked open just enough for Nora to slip through. Her eyes were wide and red-rimmed as she took in the sight of my open suitcase and the neat stacks of clothes on my bed. "You're really leaving?" she whispered, hovering by the door as if ready to flee. I didn't answer right away. I just held up the bank statements, the brochure. I didn't have to say a word. Her face crumpled. "I'm so sorry, Audrey," she choked out, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I heard them talking. Weeks ago." "You knew?" The words were quiet, but they felt like stones in my mouth. "You knew they were planning this?" "I was scared," she sobbed, shrinking back against the door. "Dad said, he said anyone who warned you would be next. He said I'd be out on the street too." I wanted to be angry with her. I wanted to scream. But the raw terror in her face was too real. She was just a kid, trapped in the same toxic mess I was finally escaping. "There's more," she whispered, glancing nervously back toward the hallway. "Mom's doctor appointments, the ones you've been paying for? What about them?" I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't sure I could handle another revelation. Last week, she came home and her lips were all puffy. She told Dad the doctor said she couldn't drink through a straw for a couple of days. Nora mimicked our mother's dismissive little eye roll perfectly. "It wasn't a checkup, Audrey. It was fillers." The room seemed to tilt. Fillers. Cosmetic procedures. I pulled up my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers moving stiffly. I showed Nora the screen. My savings account balance, $763.42. 3 months ago, I had over $9,000 saved up, I told her, my voice hollow. This is what's left. After paying for everything. For groceries, for the lights, for Mom's fillers. If I had stayed one more month, I would have been completely broke. I would have had nothing. The severity of it finally hit me, a wave of nausea rolling through my stomach. I hadn't just been helping out. I had been on the brink of financial ruin, and they knew it. They had watched it happen, all while hoarding their secret stash of cash for a fishing boat. Nora just stared at the phone, her tears forgotten, her face pale with shock. She finally understood. I tucked the folder of statements securely into my purse. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a conspiracy. And I had all the evidence I needed. I didn't say goodbye. After Nora slipped out of my room, I finished packing in a blur of cold, efficient rage. I carried my suitcase and 2 boxes down to my car, the one thing that was entirely in my name, bought and paid for with my own money. The engine turning over in the quiet of the night was the sound of my escape. I drove away from that house, from that life, and didn't look back once. My best friend Joel lived in an apartment complex about 20 minutes away. When I called him from the road, my voice shaking, he just said 2 words, "I'm buzzing you in." He didn't ask questions. He just opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. He hauled my boxes inside while I sank onto his pull-out couch, the reality of being homeless at 25 washing over me. "You're safe here," he said, handing me a glass of water. "Stay as long as you need." That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and began what I started calling Operation Financial Freedom. For the last 2 years, I had been meticulously tracking my finances. Every bill, every receipt, every statement was scanned and saved in a password-protected folder on my cloud drive. I called it my digital fortress. At the time, I just thought it was good financial practice. Now, I realized it was my arsenal. I logged into the electric company's website. My name was the primary account holder. I clicked the button, Cancel Service. A confirmation box popped up. "Are you sure? Service will be disconnected within 24 hours. A grim smile touched my lips. Yes. Next, the water bill. Cancel service. Click. The internet and cable bundle. Cancel service. Click. My cell phone plan was a family plan, with me as the account owner. I logged in. I transferred ownership of my parents' and Nora's lines to my father's name, a process that would require him to accept financial responsibility, and then removed myself completely. My phone would stay on. Theirs would be suspended until he either paid up or set up his own plan. By 4 a.m., I had systematically dismantled every financial tie that bound me to them. Every account I had paid for was now scheduled for termination or was squarely in their court. I felt a grim, satisfying sense of power. They wanted me gone? Fine. But they were about to find out exactly what I had been providing. The first counterattack came 3 days later. My phone rang, and the caller ID showed Aunt Brenda. My mother's sister. I answered, expecting a concerned voice. I was wrong. Audrey? I have to say, I am just shocked, she began, her tone dripping with judgment. To just abandon your parents when they need you most, after your mother lost her job. I never thought you were so selfish. My blood ran cold. Did Dad tell you he kicked me out? I asked, my voice level. He told me you threw a tantrum over nothing and stormed out, she sniffed. He's very worried about you, Audrey. He says you haven't been yourself lately, that you're unstable. Unstable. The word hit me like a stone. He wasn't just telling people I left. He was poisoning the well. He was trying to paint me as crazy, as unreliable. He was controlling the narrative. I'm sure he is, I said, and ended the call before she could say another word. The real bombshell dropped that evening. A text from Nora. It was a single, panicked line. Audrey, you have to be careful. Dad went to the police station this afternoon. My heart hammered against my ribs. I called her immediately. She spoke in a terrified whisper, huddled in her closet so our parents wouldn't hear. He filed a report, she choked out. He told them you're mentally unstable. He said you stole things when you left. Mom's jewelry, some family heirlooms, things he said Grandma gave you. It was a lie. A vicious, calculated lie. I hadn't taken a single thing that wasn't mine. He was creating a paper trail. He was setting me up, painting me as a thief and a mental case so that if I ever tried to fight back, he would have an official report to discredit me. He wasn't just kicking me out. He was trying to destroy me. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking again, but this time it was with a different kind of energy. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was war. And he had just made a critical mistake. He thought I was a hysterical girl who would run and hide. He had no idea I had a fortress. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you've given me a like, and I'll know you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment with the number 1, and then listen to the rest of my story. The first sign that my operation was a success came 2 days later, in the form of a frantic, shrieking phone call from my mother. "What did you do, Audrey?" she yelled, without so much as a hello. "The power's out. The internet is down, and my insurance was declined at my appointment." I took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "I stopped paying for things that are not my responsibility," I said, my voice even. "But you can't just do that. We're your family. We'll be in the dark." "Family doesn't call family a Leech at Thanksgiving dinner," I replied, and the line went quiet for a moment. "Your father didn't mean it," she said, her tone shifting to a wheedling, placating one. "You know how he gets. Just turn everything back on, and we can forget this ever happened." "I know exactly how he gets," I said. "That's the problem." I ended the call. That evening, Joel and I were in his small living room, trying to watch a movie. But I was on edge, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Every creak of the old apartment building made me jump. And then, it happened. It wasn't a knock. It was a boom. A heavy, furious pounding that rattled the apartment door in its frame. Boom. 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 "Audrey!" My father's voice, muffled but unmistakable, roared through the wood. "Open this door right now. I know you're in there." Joel shot up from the couch, his eyes wide. He motioned for me to stay put, to call the police. But I was already moving. This was it. This was the confrontation I knew was coming. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole. His face was just inches away, flushed a deep, mottled red, his features twisted with a rage I had only ever seen him direct at strangers. His eyes were wild. "You think you can just run away and destroy our lives?" he bellowed, pounding again, harder this time. The door frame shuddered. "You ungrateful little brat." A door opened across the hall. Mrs. Gable, a sweet retiree who baked cookies for Joel, peered out cautiously. Her eyes widened in alarm. "Young man," she called out, her voice quavering but firm. "You need to stop that this instant. I'm calling building security." Walter whirled toward her. "Mind your own damn business, lady," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at her. "This is a family matter." He turned back to my door, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous snarl. "Audrey. If you don't open this door right now, I swear I will kick it down." He wasn't bluffing. He took a step back, and I saw him brace himself. My hands were trembling as I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, whispering my location to the dispatcher. As I was speaking, I heard a sickening crack. He had kicked the door, hard, right near the lock. The wood splintered. Through the damaged door, I heard the elevator ding down the hall, followed by heavy footsteps. "Sir. Step away from the door immediately." The authoritative voice of the building security guard cut through my father's shouts. "This is my daughter's place. I have every right to be here." Walter bellowed. "You have no right to damage property or disturb the residents, sir. The police have been called." The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, a welcome and terrifying sound. Minutes later, I watched through the peephole as 2 police officers escorted my father down the hallway. He was still shouting, still ranting that I was the one destroying the family, that I was unstable. One of the officers, a woman with a calm, no-nonsense face, returned to take my statement. Her name tag read Rodriguez. "Ma'am, your father is claiming you're mentally unwell and that he was just here to perform a wellness check," she said, her expression neutral. And there it was. His disgusting, calculated lie, now being repeated by a police officer. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "Officer," I said, "that is the narrative he is trying to create. He filed a false report against me 2 days ago to lay this groundwork." She raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "And why would he do that?" This was my moment. I took a deep breath. "Because for the last 3 months, I have been paying every single one of his bills. When he kicked me out on Thanksgiving, I canceled those services. He's not here for a wellness check. He's here because his lights are off. I unlocked my phone. I have everything here, I said, my voice gaining strength. Bank statements showing the transfers to his account. Scanned copies of the utility bills in my name that I've been paying. Text messages from my mother asking me to pay for cosmetic procedures she claimed were medical necessities. I handed the phone to her. She took it, and I watched her face as she scrolled. Her neutral expression slowly hardened. Her eyes narrowed. She scrolled for what felt like an eternity, swiping through months of my life, my money, my sacrifice. When she finally looked up, the skepticism was gone. It was replaced by a look of grim understanding. "I see," she said, handing the phone back. She turned to her partner. "Detain him for attempted forced entry and public disturbance." Through the peephole, I watched them put my father in handcuffs. The man who had terrorized my life, who had held all the power, looked small and pathetic under the fluorescent lights of the hallway. "Ma'am," Officer Rodriguez said, turning back to me. "Given the documented financial manipulation and this incident, would you like to press charges?" Joel stood beside me, his hand a comforting weight on my shoulder. I looked at the splintered door, the symbol of my father's rage, and thought of the lies he had told, the web he had tried to weave around me. "Yes," I said, the word small but firm. "Yes, I would. And I'd like to file for a restraining order." The days after my father's arrest were a strange mix of terrifying and liberating. The restraining order was granted, a crisp sheet of paper that felt like a shield. But the war wasn't over. My family's campaign of harassment just went underground. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from cousins and aunts I hadn't spoken to in years, all telling me I had broken my mother's heart and shamed the family by having my own father arrested. I stopped reading them. The real gut punch came a week later. I had been trying to work from Joel's couch, but I needed files from my personal laptop. I realized with a jolt of panic that in my haste, I had left my laptop and my good camera, my one expensive hobby, in my old bedroom. Just as the worry began to set in, my phone pinged with a text from my mother. It was the first time she'd contacted me since her panicked call about the utilities. My heart clenched, thinking it might be an apology, an olive branch. How naive I still was. The message read, "Had to pawn your camera and laptop to cover the electric bill you left us with. They're at Parkway Pawn on 4th Street. I got $300 for them. You owe me the money plus interest." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. The sheer audacity, the unmitigated gall of it, was breathtaking. She stole my property worth over $2,000, sold it for a pittance, and then had the nerve to tell me I owed her. It wasn't just about the money. It was the violation. It was her treating my possessions, my life, as nothing more than her personal emergency fund. Anger, hot and fresh, surged through me, burning away any lingering sadness. I showed the text to Joel, who just shook his head in disbelief. "The delusion is almost impressive," he muttered. "She made a mistake," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "She told me where they are." I saved a screenshot of the message. Then I went to my digital fortress, my cloud drive, and pulled up the original receipts for both the laptop and the camera. I had the serial numbers, the purchase dates, everything. I was armed and ready. I filed a police report for theft. The officer I spoke to, a Detective Miller, was professional and took me seriously, especially when I showed him the text message from my mother. "Pawning someone else's property is a criminal offense, ma'am," he explained. "Admitting to it in a text message makes our job a lot easier." But it wasn't that simple. 2 days later, Detective Miller called me back, a note of frustration in his voice. "Miss Evans," he said, "I have a problem. I went to Parkway Pawn. The owner, a man named Marty, claims he has no record of those items. He says your mother may have come in, but he didn't buy anything from her that day. He's stonewalling." My heart sank. Of course. It was a grimy, cash-only place on the bad side of town. It was the kind of place where things could easily disappear. My father probably knew the owner. It was another layer of their dirty little world. "There's nothing else you can do?" I asked, defeat creeping into my voice. Without the items themselves or a pawn ticket, my hands are tied. He claims he has no surveillance footage from that day. I'm sorry. I hung up, feeling weary and defeated for the first time in weeks. They had taken my sense of security, they had taken my money, and now they had taken my things. It felt like they would just keep winning. That night, unable to sleep, I found myself doing something I hadn't done in years. I was scrolling through local online forums, community message boards for Dayton, a sort of old-school Craigslist. I was just aimlessly looking, I don't know what for. And then I saw it. It was a post on a photographer's trading forum. The username was anonymous, Camera Guy 82. The post read, selling a barely used Canon EOS camera with a 50mm lens. Great condition. Also have a 15-inch laptop, works perfectly. Selling both as a bundle for cheap. Need cash fast. DM for pics. My heart started to pound. It could be anyone. It was a long shot. But something told me. I created a fake account and sent a message. "Hey, interested in the camera/laptop bundle. Can you send pics and the serial numbers so I can check if they're legit?" An hour later, a reply came through. It was a picture of my camera, sitting on a cluttered desk next to my laptop. I could see the small, unique scratch on the corner of the laptop lid. And then, a second message with 2 strings of numbers. The serial numbers. My hands flew across my keyboard as I pulled up my saved receipts. I checked the numbers. They were a perfect match. I felt a jolt of pure adrenaline, a surge of triumphant energy. I had him. I took screenshots of the entire conversation, the username, the pictures, the serial numbers. I emailed everything to Detective Miller with the subject line, "I found my stolen property." Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Miller. "Miss Evans," he said, and for the first time, I could hear a smile in his voice. "You did our job for us. This is incredible work." An anonymous username on a public forum selling items that a pawn shop owner claims he never had. This is more than enough for a search warrant. He paused for a moment. "You know," he added, "this Marty character at Parkway Pawn is going to be in a whole lot of trouble. So is your mother." A cold, clean wave of satisfaction washed over me. I had been smarter. I had been more persistent. They thought they could operate in the shadows, using their shady connections to cheat the system. But they didn't count on me dragging them out into the light. A week later, I found myself driving back to the last place on earth I ever wanted to see, my parents' house. But this time was different. This time, I wasn't arriving as a disgraced daughter. I was arriving with a police escort. Officer Rodriguez, the same officer from the night of the confrontation at Joel's, was in her cruiser right behind me. We had arranged it so I could retrieve my remaining personal belongings without incident. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw the curtains twitching in the neighbors' windows. Mrs. Henderson from next door was pretending to check her mailbox. Let them watch. Let the whole neighborhood see the truth for a change, not the twisted version my father had been peddling for months. My mother answered the door. Her face, a carefully constructed mask of weary concern, faltered when she saw Officer Rodriguez standing behind me. "Diane," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I'm here for my things." "Mrs. Miller," Officer Rodriguez said, her voice official and firm. "I am here to accompany Audrey while she retrieves her belongings to ensure there are no disturbances." Mom paled and stepped aside without a word. The house felt smaller, darker than I remembered. She hovered in the hallway as I went straight to my old bedroom, the officer following close behind. I worked quickly, packing books, clothes, and personal items into boxes I'd brought. "That furniture belongs to the family, Audrey," Mom said from the doorway, her arms crossed, her voice regaining some of its familiar entitlement. "The desk, the bookshelf. You can't just take everything." This was the moment I had prepared for. I pulled my tablet from my bag. With a few taps, I pulled up my digital fortress and opened a folder labeled Household Purchases. "This desk," I said, tapping the screen to show her the receipt from Office Depot, paid with my credit card. "This bookshelf, from IKEA, paid with my debit card. This mattress, which I bought when I moved back home after college. I have digital receipts for every single item I am taking, Diane. Would you like to see them?" I held the tablet out to her. Officer Rodriguez glanced from the screen to my mother's face. The surprise in the officer's eyes was clear. "Ma'am," she said, her tone professional but with an unmistakable edge, "these documents show your daughter has purchased a significant amount of this household's assets. She is well within her rights to take what she can prove is hers." My mother's mouth opened, then snapped shut. A flush crept up her neck. Without another word, she turned and retreated down the hallway. When the last box was loaded into my car, I turned to lock the front door one final time. Just as my key slid into the lock, the sound of an engine made me look up. A second car was pulling into the driveway. My other car. A reliable sedan that I'd left parked at Joel's. And behind the wheel was my father. My stomach plummeted. The spare key. In all the chaos, I'd forgotten I'd given them a spare key for emergencies. Walter stepped out of my car, jingling my keys in his hand. His face was a storm of smug triumph. He walked towards me, his chest puffed out. "We need to discuss what you owe us before you take this, too," he said, gesturing towards the car I was about to drive away in. He actually thought he was in a position to negotiate. I set down the last box I was holding and reached into my purse. I pulled out a crisp, folded document I had been carrying with me for this exact possibility. "This," I said, holding up the paper so he could see the state seal, "is the title to that car." I pulled out a second document. "And this is the registration. Both are exclusively in my name. You are currently in possession of stolen property." Officer Rodriguez stepped forward, her hand resting lightly on her belt. "Sir," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "That vehicle is registered to Audrey Evans. You need to hand over those keys. Immediately." The color drained from my father's face. He looked from the documents in my hand, to the officer, and back again. For a second, I thought he might actually refuse. His hand tightened around the keys. "I paid for her college," he spluttered, his voice cracking. "Her braces. 18 years of." "The keys, Mr. Miller," Officer Rodriguez repeated, her voice like ice. She held out her hand. Slowly, his fingers uncurled. The keys dropped into her open palm with a soft jingle. She passed them to me, and as our fingers touched, I looked at my father. And for the first time in my life, I saw him completely and utterly defeated. The man who had towered over our family, whose moods had dictated the emotional temperature of our entire lives, suddenly looked small. He was just a bitter, diminished old man standing in a driveway. I met his eyes one last time. "Come near me, my home, or my property again," I said, my voice clear and calm, "and this restraining order will be the least of your problems." "I will not hesitate." I slid into my car, the one he had tried to take, adjusted the mirror, and turned the key. As I pulled away from the curb, I saw Mrs. Henderson standing on her lawn, phone in hand, no longer pretending to check her mail. She was a witness. They were all witnesses to the final act. In my rearview mirror, I saw Nora appear in the doorway of the house. She stood there, caught between two worlds, and raised a hand in a small, tentative wave. The 3 months after that final showdown felt like waking up from a long, feverish dream. The world seemed quieter, the colors brighter. I found a small, one-bedroom apartment in a part of town I'd always liked, a place with big windows and old hardwood floors. The day I signed the lease, I sat on the floor of the empty living room and just cried. Not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming, bone-deep relief. The restraining order was a silent guardian, a legal wall between my past and my future. The legal fallout for my parents was less dramatic than a TV show, but it was real. My father received probation for the public disturbance and attempted entry. My mother got a misdemeanor theft charge for the pawn shop incident, which came with a fine and community service. They had a criminal record now, a small but permanent stain on the pristine image they cared so much about. But my focus wasn't on them anymore. It was on me. It was on the quiet, simple joy of rebuilding a life that was entirely my own. I spent a whole weekend painting an accent wall in my living room a deep, moody teal. I didn't ask for anyone's opinion. I didn't have to listen to anyone tell me I'd regret the color choice. The freedom of that small act was enormous. I bought a mismatched set of dishes from a thrift store and a second-hand dining table. I arranged my books on the bookshelf I had triumphantly taken from my old room. Every object in my apartment told a story, and it was my story. The best feeling, though, was seeing my bank account begin to heal. The first bill that arrived addressed to me at my new apartment was for the electricity. I paid it online, and a wave of contentment washed over me. There were no other names on the account. No one else's financial emergency was hiding between the envelopes. My emergency fund, which had been decimated down to that terrifying $763, began to grow again, slowly but steadily. My goal was 6 months of security. After 3 months, I was already halfway there. I started seeing a therapist, someone to help me unpack the years of emotional and financial manipulation. She helped me understand that what I had experienced wasn't normal family drama, it was abuse. She gave me the language for it, and with that language came understanding, and with understanding came healing. I learned to set boundaries, not just with my parents, but in all areas of my life. I learned that no is a complete sentence. Sometimes, late at night, a flicker of the old life would try to creep in. A text from Aunt Brenda asking if I was ready to apologize yet. An email from a cousin forwarding a family newsletter with a pointedly omitted name, mine. I created a filter in my email that sent anything from a known family address directly to a folder I never opened. I blocked the numbers. I built my walls, not out of anger anymore, but out of a fierce, necessary self-protection. One afternoon, I was sitting on my new couch, a cup of tea warming my hands, and the sun was streaming through the windows I had chosen. My phone was silent. The bills were paid. There was food in my refrigerator. I was safe. And I had done it all myself. The peace I felt in that moment was something I had never known before. It was the peace of true independence, a quiet contentment that was worth more than any amount of money in a secret bank account or any shiny new fishing boat. It was the feeling of being, finally, and completely, free. A year after my life blew up, I found myself in my own kitchen, basting a turkey. It was a smaller turkey than the one I'd made the year before, but it was perfect. The aroma of sage and roasting poultry filled my small apartment, a scent that had once been tied to so much pain, but was now, finally, just the smell of a holiday. The irony of me hosting Thanksgiving was not lost on me. But this wasn't a performance. It wasn't an obligation. It was a celebration. My sister Nora hovered uncertainly by the kitchen counter. "Can I help with anything, Audrey?" She looked different now. Taller, somehow, though she hadn't grown an inch. It was the confidence she carried. With my help navigating financial aid forms and housing applications, she had started her freshman year at a college 2 hours away. She was flourishing, away from the suffocating atmosphere of our parents' home. "Your company is contribution enough," I told her, and the words felt natural, true. There was no secret tally of expenses being kept in my head, no measuring of worth by what someone provided. Soon, my small dining table was full. Joel was there, laughing his big, booming laugh. My found family. We raised our glasses. To found family, Joel said, his eyes meeting mine. And to boundaries worth keeping. We all clinked glasses. It was simple, and it was everything. Later, as Nora and I were clearing the dishes, she mentioned the latest update from home. They lost the house last month, she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Foreclosure. Dad's still blaming the economy, the bank, everyone but himself. I nodded, my hands still in the soapy water. I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of a strange, distant pity. Where are they now? Staying with Aunt Brenda, Nora said, scrubbing a plate. But he's already dropping hints about them finding their own place. I don't think it's going well. My eyes drifted to a small, decorative box on my bookshelf. Inside it were 5 unopened envelopes, all in my mother's handwriting, that had arrived over the past few months. Setting boundaries didn't mean the curiosity ever completely went away. They still blame you for everything, Nora continued, her voice soft. But honestly, Audrey, they're just facing what would have happened anyway. Your money was just postponing the inevitable. She was right. I hadn't destroyed the family. I had simply stopped being the dam holding back the flood of their own consequences. We finished the dishes in a comfortable silence. As Joel was getting ready to leave, he gestured to the box on the bookshelf. Ever going to open those? I looked at the letters. I thought about the words they might contain. Excuses, blame, maybe even a half-hearted, manipulative apology designed to get something from me. I thought about the peace I had fought so hard to build in my small, teal-walled apartment. The quiet mornings. The balanced checkbook. The freedom. Then I thought about what it would cost to let their chaos back into my life, even just a little bit. No, I said, and the answer felt right, all the way down to my bones. No, I don't think I will. My new life was here, in this room, with these people. The past was a closed chapter, a story to be told, but not one to be relived. And for the first time, I was truly, deeply thankful. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it can help someone out there who might be feeling trapped or undervalued. I have one question for all of you. If you were me, what would you have done with those unopened letters? Would you have read them, or left them sealed forever? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if my story resonated with you, please